Hello everyone, this is ARIRANG News. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung in Seoul. The top stories we're following at this hour. Prime Minister nominee Lee Wan-koo's fate will be decided this afternoon. The ruling party is ready to confirm him, while the main opposition party objects. Now, militants loyal to the group calling itself Islamic State released a video claiming to have beheaded 21 Egyptian Coptic Christians. Egypt vows to avenge the, quote, criminal killings. And North Korea celebrates what would have been the 73rd birthday of its late former leader Kim Jong-il. Current leader Kim Jong-un visits the mausoleum where his father lies in state. But first, the situation at the National Assembly. The parliamentary vote on the Prime Minister nominee is expected to take place this afternoon. The ruling party lawmakers are ready to give the green light, while the opposition camp is still raising objections. For more, here's ARIRANG News' Park Ji-won.
The ruling Saenuri Party, which holds a majority in parliament, says it will push ahead with the confirmation vote for Prime Minister nominee Lee Wan-koo, who used to be its former floor leader up until late last month. The ruling party is stressing that the rival parties agreed last week to hold a vote during Monday's plenary session, and there should be no further delays to avoid a vacuum in state affairs.
I sincerely urge the opposition parties to attend Monday's plenary session in order to proceed with bills aimed at revitalizing our economy and helping working people.
The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy is demanding Lee withdraw from consideration due to a number of allegations swirling around him, from real estate speculation to the way he accumulated his wealth.
The nominee has to step away from consideration because he lied in front of the people.
This is the Park administration's third attempt to replace incumbent Prime Minister Chung Hong-won. Chung offered to step down in the wake of last April's Seoul ferry disaster. However, he has remained in his position until now, as two previous nominees were forced to withdraw for various reasons. If Lee is confirmed, the presidential office is expected to carry out a small reshuffle, including cabinet members and presidential aides, based on the new prime minister's recommendations. Park Ji-won, ARIRANG News.
President Park Geun-hye has called for a unification roadmap that includes benefits for not only the two Koreas but their neighboring countries and the world. At a meeting with her Unification Preparatory Committee, President Park highlighted a need for overseas public and private investment in infrastructure for a unified Korea to offset the anticipated unification costs. Her envisioned blueprint would include funding for social overhead capital and resources development in the north. Now, she also asked the committee to work with civic groups to expand people-to-people exchanges so that the economic and social gaps between the two Koreas can be narrowed. North Korea is celebrating the 73rd birthday of its late former leader Kim Jong-il on this Monday. North Koreans call this day the Day of the Shining Star. The state-run Korean Central News Agency says Kim Jong-un visited the mausoleum called Kumsusan Palace of the Sun at midnight to pay tribute to his father and grandfather, Kim Il-sung. The young leader was accompanied by key high-ranking officials, but his wife Lee Seol-ju and sister Kim Yo-jung were not present. The state media also ran a live broadcast of Pyongyang residents setting off fireworks over the Taedong-gang River to mark the anniversary. North Korea watchers say lavish firework displays have become more common in Pyongyang since Kim Jong-un came into power. Now, militants loyal to the extremist group known as Islamic State have released a video showing the massive beheading of 21 Egyptian Christians. Egypt, in response, has vowed to avenge the deaths. ARIRANG News' Connie Lee has this story.
Egypt's president says his country will avenge the killings of its people by the terrorist group calling itself Islamic State.
Egypt reserves the right of retaliation, and with the methods and timing it sees fit for retribution from those murderers and criminals who are without the slightest humanity.
His televised statement comes just hours after the militants released a horrifying 5-minute video on Sunday, appearing to show the beheading of 21 Egyptian Coptic Christians. The killings take place not in the militant group's known territory of Syria or Iraq, but in Libya. Egypt's state-run news agency quoted a spokesperson for the Coptic Church confirming that the 21 Egyptian captives were dead. In the video, the victims, all male and wearing orange jumpsuits, are shown being marched along a beach. Each victim is accompanied by a terrorist in a black mask holding a knife. The video is called A Message Signed with Blood to the Nation of the Cross, and as it takes place in Libya, it raises concern that the militant group is expanding and has an affiliate outside of the group's core territory of Iraq and Syria. Thousands of Egyptians are said to have gone to Libya in search of work since the Arab Revolution there in 2011. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
And on to the latest on the shootout in Denmark that happened over the weekend. Police in Denmark say the suspected gunman was a 22-year-old Danish national. Officials are now trying to find out if there was a person or group supporting his actions. Son Jung-in reports.
Police in Denmark are focusing their investigation on the gunman's movements before, during, and after the deadly twin shootings that ended on Sunday when he was shot dead by police. Danish intelligence agency chief says the suspect, a 22-year-old man born in Denmark, was on their watch list prior to the attack.
It's a person who was known to us, so yes, it was a person on intelligence's radar.
Withholding his name, authorities said the attacker was known to the police for several criminal offenses, including violence, gang-related activities, and possession of weapons. After assessing CCTV footage, police believe the man acted alone, but they're still trying to see if the suspect received assistance from others. The gunman opened fire at an arts cafe that was hosting a debate on freedom of speech on Saturday afternoon. Among those in attendance was Swedish cartoonist Lars Vilks, who has received death threats in 2007 when his depiction of the Prophet Muhammad as a dog was published. The suspect was shot dead early on Sunday after a second attack at a synagogue. The carnage killed 2 civilians and injured 5 police officers. The Danish Prime Minister says the shooting was a politically motivated terrorist attack, and she promised to protect freedom of speech and the Jewish community in the country. The incident brings up memories of the recent terror attack in Paris. The French ambassador to Denmark, who attended Saturday's debate, believes the motivation for the cafe shooting was the same as for the shooting at the French weekly Charlie Hebdo that left 12 people dead. Son Jung-in, ARIRANG News.
The ceasefire declared in eastern Ukraine appears to be sticking. Mostly holding is how the mediators of Germany and France are characterizing it, though sounds of shelling still continue to be heard in the strategic transport hub of Debaltseve. Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko gave the order to halt all fire starting Sunday. The Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe says it dispatched 20 patrols across eastern Ukraine to monitor the situation on the ground. But it said its monitors were kept out of Debaltseve, which pro-Russia rebels have fought to surround in recent weeks. The UN Security Council, in the meantime, is preparing a resolution that would codify the Minsk deal inked by Ukraine, Russia, Germany, and France. The Eurozone finance ministers will meet in Brussels later on this Monday to discuss the future of Greece's bailout program. Ahead of that meeting, though, thousands poured into the streets across Greece in an anti-austerity protest. Police said the rally outside the Parliament House in Athens alone drew some 20,000 people. Crowds held up banners reading "Stop Austerity, Support Greece, Change Europe," as they said austerity policies were impoverishing the people. Protests also spread to cities beyond the country's borders. In Paris, a group of 2,000 people showed solidarity against what they called the Goliath of finance as they marched through the city center. Korea's population is aging fast. It's a problem that poses a grave challenge to the government and healthcare services. But the growing number of senior citizens also presents new opportunities for certain industries, and it seems that manufacturers of medical devices are benefiting the most. Here's our Connie Kim with this week's Industry Insight.
Come 2026, about a quarter of the nation's total population will be 65 or older. Now, zeroing in on this lucrative market, Korea's medical machinery industry is targeting the silver generation. The domestic medical device industry has been growing about 5% annually over the past 6 years, topping $4.2 billion in 2013. And it'll only increase as demand rises with the changing senior demographic. But it's not a surge in cutting-edge operating room hardware that's leading the way. Looking at the most recent data, the top manufactured devices were dental implants devices and dental alloys used in fillings. About 9 out of 10 seniors in Korea are implant recipients. The country's leading dental X-ray manufacturer, Vatek, is just one of the many companies that see the potential for this market and is aiming to cash in.
It's important to use accurate dental X-rays, especially for seniors, considering that implant surgery comes with high risk. We expect a surge in demand for our X-ray machines.
And another fact, 1 in 5 seniors are known to be suffering from diabetes. Green Cross MS, a company that specializes in diagnostic tools, recently acquired a blood glucose monitor maker. The company says it's a landmark deal that'll help it focus more on developing technology for the elderly.
This will help us access the ubiquitous healthcare market. We are currently doing research on how a smartphone could be used to track heart rates, cholesterol, and hemoglobin levels.
Medical devices are evolving, going smart and high-tech. Analysts forecast the industry will continue to head towards helping older generations.
Medical machines have gotten smaller, small enough for elders to carry around. If the technology to send data from these medical machines to hospitals are developed, a new ubiquitous healthcare industry will open up.
Korea's changing demographics are affecting how the local market will expand. In the past, medical advancements and devices squarely focused on curing people and saving lives. But now, the landscape of the industry is shifting towards helping people live healthier and longer. Connie Kim, ARIRANG News.
In the year 2012, where Korea was at its record high.
All of the day's important events close to home and around the world. Join Laah Hyun-kyung live from Seoul.
Shopping market thinks the true meaning of creation shines through. In many parts of the world, we continue to see countries ease their monetary policies, but what about Korea? The central bank will hold its monetary policy meeting tomorrow. Attention is on whether it will follow the path of its global counterparts. ARIRANG News' Hwang Ji-hye has more.
So far this year, 17 countries and the European Central Bank have eased their monetary policies, either by lowering their key interest rates or introducing quantitative easing programs. Canada, Switzerland, and 11 emerging economies like India and China are in this race, which comes as the countries try to prop up their ailing domestic economies. Now, pressure for further monetary easing by Korea's central bank is piling up. But analysts say it's unlikely the central bank will take action on Tuesday.
This month's monetary policy meeting is taking place right before the Lunar New Year holiday, and the central bank has not signaled a rate cut, so it will keep the rate unchanged for this month.
Korea's Finance Minister Choi Kyung-hwan also emphasized last week that it's more important to push through structural reforms than to debate over a rate cut. Still, analysts expect a rate cut to take place sometime in the second quarter this year.
The Korean economy is not showing signs of momentum for a solid recovery so far this year, just like in the fourth quarter of last year. To give a much-needed boost to the economy, the central bank is expected to cut the rate in April or May before the U.S. Federal Reserve starts to raise its key interest rate.
Korea's low inflation rate is also giving the central bank room to trim its key interest rate. Consumer prices were running below the BOK's 2.5% to 3.5% inflation target band for more than 2 years in January. Some analysts say, however, that the central bank will not join the global move toward monetary easing, as there's no clear sign of it affecting the local financial market. Hwang Ji, ARIRANG News.
Investments coming from China and Japan are increasing. The combined net buying of Korean shares and bonds by the two neighboring countries hit a high not seen since 2010. ARIRANG News' Kim Min-ji has this story.
Foreign capital, especially from China and Japan, is pouring into the Korean financial market. According to the Financial Supervisory Service, Chinese and Japanese investors bought a net $6.7 billion worth of Korean shares and bonds last year. That's more than double from 2013 and an all-time high since the watchdog first began compiling such data in 2009. Experts say while other countries have been cautious when it comes to Korea, which has been suffering from slow growth and low prices, China and Japan have been aggressive in tapping into the market. Last year, Japanese investors bought a net $2.8 billion worth of shares on the Seoul bourse, while Chinese investors bought a net $1.8 billion in shares. Combined, it's a significant number considering that the total net purchases made by foreigners came to $5.7 billion. On the bond market, Chinese investors bought a net $2 billion in bonds last year, becoming the largest investor. In terms of bond holdings, China ranks second, trailing behind the United States. Experts say the inflow of capital from the two neighboring nations can be attributed to China's rapid economic growth and Japan's quantitative easing programs. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
The cashable assets of Korean conglomerates hit a record high last year amid lingering financial uncertainties. Data from the Bank of Korea and local investment firms shows that the combined cashable assets of the country's top 500 firms reached over $144 billion as of the end of the third quarter of 2014. Now, that amount represents an increase of roughly $7 billion from the end of 2013 and a surge of nearly $100 billion compared to 10 years ago. Analysts attribute the spike to companies remaining reluctant to invest or having a hard time finding profitable investment opportunities due to economic uncertainties both at home and abroad. They point out that the firms should hand over more dividends to shareholders. The winds of change seem to be blowing through the global auto industry, with many of the world's leading automakers pulling factory operations out of emerging markets and putting them back in their home nations. Song Ji-sun reports.
The days of automakers busily building new plants in emerging markets may soon be over, with demand slowing in those nations and the growing need to create more homegrown jobs in their own nations. The Korea Automotive Research Institute says auto demand in the BRIC nations, Brazil, Russia, India, and China, is expected to sag this year, especially when compared to recovery seen in developed markets like the US and Europe. The Russian market is slumping at the fastest rate. It's projected to shrink 29% this year, marking negative growth for the third consecutive year. China, the world's largest auto market, still boasts annual demand of 20 million units, up 8% from last year, but that's slower than last year's 11% expansion. With emerging markets slowing, some leading automakers are going back to their roots. Ford, for example, relocated its Mexican truck factory to Ohio last year, following the U.S. government's decision to give auto firms incentives for creating new jobs in the United States. Japanese automaker Nissan also announced it was bringing operations at its Rogue factory in the U.S. state of Tennessee back to Japan. That said, Korean automakers Hyundai Motor and Kia Motors are still expanding their production output overseas. Domestic demand in Korea is limited, and they're looking to catch up with global automakers in terms of annual production units. Song Ji-sun, ARIRANG News.
While other musicals have come and gone, Jekyll and Hyde has stayed on. It's a successful Broadway musical that premiered here in Korea over 10 years ago. And our Im Yoon-hee is here today to tell us about an important landmark it reached over the weekend. Good afternoon, Yoon-hee.
Good afternoon, that's right. So Jekyll and Hyde is one of the most popular musicals, and now it's one of the most successful. This past weekend, they reached the 1,000th show mark, a big landmark for a musical here in Korea. Take a look at this next report.
A man determined to find out why there is both evil and good within humankind. But along the process, Dr. Henry Jekyll finds himself at the mercy of a great evil within his own body, who appears in the form of Hyde. The musical first debuted in Korea in 2004 and was an immediate hit. Through the years, it steadily attracted audience members, filling the theater at over 80% capacity with each show. Before, no matter how early I tried to book tickets, I could never get a good seat. This time around, I was able to get my hands on something.
When Yoo Jung-han plays Jekyll, he gives a powerful performance. And when Cho Seung-woo plays the role, the overall impression is so different, but each performance has its charms.
Now in its 11th year, the musical boasts over 106 million audience members. And this past weekend, it reached its 1,000th show, a landmark accomplishment for a musical. But there's no mystery as to why. With a star-studded cast and special effects to match, it's a show built on the hard work of all those involved.
It's exciting, and to be able to do 1,000 performances is such an honor. I always tell people that Jekyll and Hyde is the best performance I've been in.
Jekyll and Hyde has been shown on all the major theaters throughout the country and has become a household musical name in the country, now joining the ranks of Korea's most prestigious musical productions.
So I'm thinking there aren't a lot of musicals that were able to achieve this same landmark.
Right, so this Jekyll and Hyde musical is only the third musical to reach the 1,000 performance mark. The first one was The Last Empress, which reached in 2009. That's Korea's very first original musical production, but also Mamma Mia, which had the original London cast here last year. They also reached the 1,000 mark. So a very big, a very big feat for this musical to reach, 1,000 shows.
So for Mamma Mia, though, the most of the performances were done in Korean by Korean casts, and that's the case for Jekyll and Hyde as well.
Exactly. So Jekyll and Hyde was also produced in Korean with the Korean cast, and actually with Jekyll and Hyde, the performances, they said it was tailor-made to fit the Korean audience, and they actually went and they wanted to appeal to the Korean audience and the preferences. So with the songs and with the way they, put the production on, they said they really wanted to appeal to the Korean audience, and it seems like it worked.
Okay, all right. That's all the time we have for today, Yoon-hee, unfortunately. Thank you very much for coming in today.
You're welcome.
Hello, I'm Michelle Park here with the latest weather forecast. It's currently drizzling nationwide and we can't expect it to last until the end of the day, so make sure to have your umbrellas with you on your evening commute. Now, the estimated amount of precipitation will vary depending on where you are here in Korea. The province can expect the most up to 30 millimeters, while Seoul and the central region can be expected up to 5 and 20, while Jeju and Jeolla, the provinces, can expect the most least at 5 millimeters. Now, although it's raining now, temperatures are mild and we are expecting them to remain that way all throughout this long holiday weekend. However, we have another round of rain in store for us on Saturday and Sunday, so make sure to plan your weekend accordingly. Now, checking out the readings for today, Seoul will peak up to 7 this afternoon, while Gwangju and Busan will reach up to 10 and 9. And moving over to other regions, Jeju Island gets up to 14, Dokdo hits down to 5, while Mangungang is snowing at -1 degrees. That's all for now. Michelle Park, and I hope you have a wonderful day, and back to you, Hyun-kyung.
All right, thank you, Michelle. That's all the time we have for now. I'm Laah Hyun-kyung in Seoul. Another edition of ARIRANG News with me coming up at 4 p.m. Korea time.